Do I wish she would have handled it differently, been a little bit more present and understanding and just there? It probably would have helped me a whole lot. But because she didn't, it didn't help me much. So off to high school I went, and it was a brand new world for me. And the first person who expressed interest in me, unbeknownst to myself, was a girl. I had no idea she was a girl. Yeah, she didn't look like a girl. And I thought she was so handsome. But the first person who was interested in me was a girl. And so my first 2 weeks of high school, I had a girlfriend. And that's because that's who was interested in me. And I felt accepted immediately. All of her friends were, dating girls and all of the things. And so I'm like, okay, well, these are my people, you know? These are my people. They accept me. They dress the way I dress. The girls played football. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, okay, these are my people. Okay, cool. So, my ninth grade year, I'm like, okay, but I'm bisexual. So, another seed planted. So, at this point, 3 seeds have been planted in my life before the age of 14, right? Low self-esteem, insecurity, false identity, immediately at 13 years old. All of these things, which is very significant at such a young age to battle with no real understanding that this is what's taking place in you, right? And it's not hard to talk about, and I enjoy talking about it because I'm a mom of a 15-year-old, and because I remember what it was like, it has really helped me increase my level of compassion, grace, mercy, and understanding for my child, towards my child, because I remember what it was like to, you don't know what's happening inside of you. And if there's no one to guide you and help you stay connected and grounded in your identity in Christ, the world will tell you who you are. And the world did just that. Took advantage of my lack of truth and understanding and took over and ran with it. The following summer, that crush that I told y'all about finally started to see you, girl. Finally started to see you, girl. But at this point, to me, at that point in my age, I'm like going on 16. They see the exterior. And from my perspective, they only want one thing, because that's all I've ever known. That's what I exposed myself to. So let me back up really quickly. My first understanding of male and female interaction, my only understanding at that age was that a male and female interaction was physical, transactional, if you catch my drift. We're on YouTube, so use your context clues. So when a young man finally did show interest in me, in my mind, he wanted that. He was attracted to me. He didn't really care about what who I was and the things that I liked and all of the things. So, you know, you start doing things that you're not supposed to be doing or that should be done between husband and wife. Amen. At a really early age. And I'm not going to say I wasn't that young. I was young. 16 is young to be venturing into that world. But that's the age that I was at 16. And I didn't have any standards or expectations of him other than that transaction, because that's all I knew. You know what I mean? My mom was not married. By this time, she has been married before, obviously. But I didn't grow up seeing healthy interaction, holy interaction between a man and a woman. I didn't grow up seeing that. What I saw was transactional all around me. Like I said, I grew up in Southeast DC. It was transactional. That's just really what it was. And so another thing, another seed that's planted, my body makes me valuable in a man's eyes, right? My appearance is what's going to get the attention of a man, a boy, honestly, because I was in middle school. Now let me tell y'all how God worked. Right as I began to venture into the world of physical interaction, I had to go live with my dad in Ohio. And so at the time, was I happy about that? No, I was not. Because again, let's be very clear. The character trait of being an overachiever, all of that was still very much in place. Mentorship was in place. AP classes, well on my way to being successful academic-wise. Now, I didn't play about that. Again, like I said, getting good grades and being a good student and overachieving and being well accomplished was still very much a driving force within me. So although it wasn't a healthy thing, it did benefit me in the long run. I say all that to say, having to go live with my dad planted a seed of anger because everything I had worked so hard for was now gone at the hands of my mom. So I thought, right? I'm sorry. When God has a plan and a purpose for your life, He will always step in. In those moments, in that moment for me, I did not understand, even know His plan. But I am thankful that in that moment, He isolated me. He pulled me right off of a road that probably would have led to a downfall for me. So having to go live with my dad my last 2 years of high school slowed me down significantly. Not to say that I was fast, but that engine of proving and getting ready to, what's the word I'm looking for? That spirit of tug and war that you develop as a teenager, where you're being combative with your parent, specifically my mom, was developing. And so me having to go live with my dad cut that branch off, right? That rebellious, there you go, rebellious. The rebellious spirit was getting ready to fester itself in my life. And the Lord, and his way, his wonderful way, cut that off. So for 2 years, although I was isolated, that seed of anger and resentment had been planted. And he knew that too, apparently, because my bonus mom, the woman that my dad had married when I was about 7 or 8 years old. Here I am, they're, still together, all of the things. They're not together now, but, at that time they were still together. And so I went to go live with them. And she is a woman of faith, a woman of God. And I am thankful that as angry as I was, I am thankful that he blessed me with her. She's such a gentle spirit, and she was the first person to teach me about forgiveness. And rest. She's a very special person to me. Despite others, what other people's relationship, and experiences, and the failed relationship between her and my dad, she was, and still is somebody who I carry in my heart, and I'm very thankful for her. And so, those last 2 years, although I was isolated from what I knew, I got to learn a little bit about God, and what it was like to just be a kid. To just be a kid and to dream. It was the first time I really thought about what I wanted to do, because time was ticking. Time was ticking. I was getting ready to be an adult. What do I want to do? She poured into me a lot. And a lot of the seeds that she planted in me are blossoming today. And I'm very thankful for him giving me her. And so again, at 16, I don't realize that then. But I realize it now. And so, those 2 years, although she had planted the seeds of, God's love and forgiveness, what that looks like in me, the seeds of anger, resentment, and bitterness were still very much what had already been planted. And the nights that I cried those tears watered the wrong seeds. And my mom became the face of my bitterness and my anger and my unforgiveness. Because although the seed had been planted, that's not something I wanted to hear. It wasn't what I wanted to hear. You know, I felt extremely rejected by my mom because I had worked so hard and I had done so much to make her proud. For her to just ship me off because of one mistake made me feel like you didn't want me here in the first place. You know what I mean? And so I vowed, and I remember this, I remember the vow that I was going to prove her wrong. Because when I left, she told me I was not going to graduate and that I was going to be pregnant somewhere doing nothing with my life. I remember that. And that fueled, that watered the seeds of anger, bitterness, and resentment towards my mom. And it grew. They grew very quickly and very big. It took up a lot of space in my life. Everything that I did was to prove her wrong. It didn't even become a matter of accomplishing things for myself and my future. It was strictly, solely to prove her wrong. A heart full of vengeance, a heart full of anger. At 16, 17 years old, all because I felt like she didn't want me there all along. She wanted my brother to be there because that's kind of what happened, right? My brother and I swapped. My brother grew up with my dad. I grew up with my mom. And during our 16, 17 years of age, we swapped. I moved up and he came down. And so it was like an immediate divide, which is a thing for the devil. But we'll get into that another episode, right? So the effects of rejection in my life took root well before I was an adult. Well before I was an adult. And when I tell you it, so many branches sprouted out of that one thing. And it blocked my view of God for many, many years. Many, many years, right? The feeling of being rejected, not accepted, not seen, can really send you down a path that for some people, they never come back from. And then for individuals like myself, you spend a lot of wasted years in search of something, someone that you're just searching for things that you think you're going to find in other people and other things. And it'll just never be enough, right? It was just never enough. I graduated, top 10% of my class. Amen. Ended up getting a partial scholarship, although I had to start over. I ended up getting a partial scholarship from for cheerleading. And I was very proud and very, very happy. And, you know, like I said, it was a partial scholarship, which meant somebody needed to help your girl pay for the remaining portion of school. And although my dad and my bonus mom, they tried what they could and they did what they could, they, you know, we still needed help. And so my dad reached out to my mom, and that didn't go very well, to say the least. And again, as much as I was angry and resentful and bitter, I still idolized my mom. I still held on to every word that she said to me, about me, all of the things. She was my idol. She was my God. Which also is not healthy, because she is a human. She's a human being. She is supposed to fall short. We all do. And so, but I didn't know that. You know, I did not know that. I didn't know that I should seek the Lord before I seek the words of my mom. I didn't know that there is no such thing as perfectionism. Jesus was the only person that was perfect that walked this earth. And so I wish that I knew that, because it would have allowed me to see my mother through the lens of grace and mercy. That she wasn't perfect, and she wasn't all-knowing and all-seeing. And to have placed that level of expectation on someone was the sole reason for my own disappointments in life, right? Nevertheless, I came back to DC based off of, you know, guidance that my mom had given me that wasn't accurate, and once again had to start over. I had lost my scholarship. Well, I turned down the scholarship. I didn't lose it. I turned down the scholarship to come back to DC just to complete 2 semesters at UDC, and I had to pay for that out of pocket. And maybe 6 months into being back home, I moved out of my mom's house and never looked back. And yet again, added fuel to the fire, and it continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. I would go months without talking and speaking, all of the things. It was a lot that happened after. And like I said, every time something happened or she didn't show up in the way that I expected her to, that anger grew stronger and stronger. And if I'm being honest with y'all, you know, again, we're talking about the effects of rejection. But these things, these emotions that develop towards people, not just your parents, but people in general, keeps you so disconnected from God, where you don't see any light at the end of any tunnel, because all you see is red, all you see is darkness. And that was me. And again, this anger, this drive to prove her wrong or to cope with how I'm feeling led me down different directions in life. One being a false identity with lesbianism. I ended up in a relationship with a woman for almost 12 years who I knew I didn't want to be with. We can get into that. We can get into that part too. But I mean, smoking weed, drinking, eating disorder, anger, unforgiveness, trust. Trust who? Yeah, okay. Forgive people? Yeah, no. For what? No such thing. First of all, I have to trust you in order to forgive you, and I don't trust you. So I'm not doing that either. Love you. What is that? What is that? Yeah, no. None of that. All of that got hidden behind, oh, I'm keeping it real. I'm going to speak how I feel. All of these things. I don't need nobody. I can do all these things by myself. All of that stemmed from a small seed of rejection planted in the 5th grade. And it seemed like every time the Lord told me to go right, I would go left. Every time. Every time. But what I love about him now, not now, I've always loved the Lord, and the Lord has always been a part of my life. I grew up in church, but did I have a relationship with the Lord? My own relationship? No. Did I have my own understanding of the Lord and his truth? No, I did not have that at all. But I did have a praying mother. I had a praying bonus mother. I had a lot of women around me that were prayerful women, and I knew that people were praying for me and loved me. And you know, God put a lot of people in place in my life that would never let me get too far, would never let me fall too far in life. And I'm so thankful for that. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. A lot of the things that did not happen for me that I wanted to happen was his way of shielding me and covering me and protecting me and keeping me on a path, although I would jump off the path quite often. Somehow, some way, my path would always still cross with him in some kind of way. And it was a beautiful thing to remember that, going through my workbook and remembering events, like I said, that I had buried, remembering events and then broadening the lens to see where his hand was in that event or in that moment, that he had orchestrated a detour that oftentimes took me the long way around because I had made a decision that he was now trying to get me out of. We're going to keep it all the way funky. But man, to know that, like, he was always there. You know what I mean? He was always there. And like sitting in his presence and having one-on-one conversations with him, because that's legit what it is. When you're praying, you're having a conversation with him, you know, and asking him questions. And I don't understand. And just that reassurance that comes over you. It's like this warm feeling, this comforting hug that comes over me every time I sit in his presence and just ask him questions about, like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? You know, why wasn't I blessed to have a mom that was affectionate and emotional and transparent, and he would just show me it doesn't matter why she didn't, this person did. You know what I mean? Like my bonus mom. I remember one of my supervisors, a white lady, throw that out there too, because an angel looks like, I'm not gonna say looks like it. God will use who he wants to use to get a message to you, no matter. It doesn't matter what they look like. They're not gonna always look like you. They're not gonna always have the same background as you. I just know now that his plan is always going to come to pass, regardless of the decisions that I make to slow it down. You know what I mean? And remember my oldest childhood friends. Her mother was so nice and so sweet. She would always let me come to their house on the weekend, and I didn't know it at the time. I met her when I was 13. That 10 years later, she would be the one to hire me to start my 13-year career in the federal government. I'm sorry. So the times in my life where I felt like I was being rejected and not seen and unappreciated, my paths would always cross with someone that would bless me in my future. It seems like in elementary school, and I'm gonna go back to the story that I told y'all at the beginning. In elementary school, I had this teacher, her name was Miss Spate, and she may or may not be living now, but she would hear, and she became like an auntie for me. My mom would let me go over her house, and she would like tutor me and take me to museums and expose me to things that I love to this day. My principal in middle school, the high school that I went to was out of my district, but my principal in my middle school, she saw my academic ability, and because of her reference, I was able to go to a different school. Being put out at 15, having to go live with my dad. got to meet a woman who loved me like her own. And she taught me how to wear makeup. She taught me what it was like to smell good, and she would let me wear her Victoria's Secret lotion, and she wasn't somebody who I didn't know. Like I said, I lived with my dad for 2 years before I came to DC, and they had just gotten married. So she was a very special person to me then, because those 2 years I was there, like I said, she had planted that seed of comfort in me, because 10 years later, I would be back. And because of the time that I had spent with her 10 years before, I found comfort and peace and quiet in her presence. And so when I really needed that, the Lord sent me back to her. I'm sorry. I say all that to say, we don't always, things don't always make sense when it's happening, right? But God has a plan for us. And nothing will ever come in the way of his plan being followed through, ever. Oh gosh, that was so emotional. Yeah, I just think it's such a beautiful thing, because that's his word, that's his promise. And to sit here and talk about it out loud, and to share my life and my journey, and to share what it looks like and feels like to allow God to walk you back through your life and show you that he was always there. It's like, how could I have, it makes me wonder how different life would be if I had trusted God sooner. I'm thankful for a second chance and doing life with him now. But and to get a full understanding of what it's like to really live life without God in your life really does allow for the enemy, the world, to steer you in the wrong direction. It did for me. I believed so much for so long, and you know, the little faith that I had and the little knowledge that I had in God helped me. You know, he was there, But again, even in those moments, I don't know. And so life continued on. And the world won for a long time. And it was reflected in my life, in me as a woman. Like I said, all of the branches that sprouted out of the root of rejection for me turned me to a very cold person. And then I had my son. And I wish I could say things changed for the better. Part of it did, and a huge part of it didn't.